All this talk about luxury goods means someone's making a lot of money there, and perhaps it's Brian. Joining me live from Chicago is Brian Gilmartin, Portfolio Manager with Trinity Asset Management. Welcome to the show, Brian. We want to talk to you
Phillip.
about retailers here in the United States. And yes, obviously foreign visitors to the U.S. is a big part of it. Also, we want to look at the state of the U.S. consumer. They're obviously a massive part of what's happening here in the U.S. So quickly, let's start with the state of the U.S. consumer. How are they doing?
Well, we'll get a good feel this week when Walmart reports. Walmart is obviously America's largest retailer. They're approaching $500 billion in annual sales now, and they're scheduled to report Thursday morning. Frankly, my own opinion from following the economics and the consumption data is the U.S. consumer continues to be in good shape. If you are a reader of Brian Westbury's blog, Brian is an economist here with a firm in Chicago. He talks about the financial obligations ratio, and in the last 10 years, basically since the peak, the housing boom in 06 peaked, the financial obligation for the average U.S. household has come down quite a bit. And by that I mean the after-tax income, the way Brian writes it, the after-tax income divided by things like mortgage, car payment, leases. So the U.S. consumer is in good shape, and I think there's a lot of concern coming into the early part of 2013 on a part of a lot of economists because of the payroll tax hit and things like that.
Well, I want to ask you about that. Let me start with the fiscal cuts that they're talking about here in Washington, D.C. It's $100 billion plus a month we're talking about. That's over $1 billion, $100 billion a year potentially on discretionary income, whether you're in the military or non-military cuts. How big of a deal is that, or is it not a big deal?
Well, I think it depends on how you mean it, Philip. Obviously, I think a lot of U.S. consumers were surprised by what happened after the election and after January 1. I don't think a lot of people, at least the anecdotal comments I heard, a lot of people were surprised by that 2% hit to their check. But if you're talking about the market, you have to realize that analysts had built a lot of this into their models, their company models, prior to the start of the year. In other words, analysts had already built this into their projections for 2013 based on the outcome of the election. So, it is a hit. What might be a bigger deal, and Dan Binder, who's a very good retail analyst out of Jefferies, wrote about it last week after the memo about Walmart circulated. You're seeing delayed tax refunds because of the way that the fiscal cliff negotiations were handled, and the IRS delayed the filings until January 30th for most U.S. tax returns.
Brian, I want to ask you, I want you to add more to the Social Security tax, because for our international audience, the Social Security tax is taken out of your paycheck. For everybody here in this studio or any place in the United States where you get paid,
that's correct.
HR gives you a statement. It has a deduction of how much taxes you paid. Social Security taxes for nearly all Americans essentially went up by 2%. So your paycheck was 2% less than it was for January compared to December.
Exactly.
How big of an impact does that have on retail sales going forward, or are we able to kind of look the other way on that?
Well, You've asked the right question, Philip, and I think it's going to be an issue probably for the first 3 to 6 months. I think people will adjust. There's other things involved here. You have gas prices. If gas prices come down, that'll be an offset. That's always been thought of in America as anytime the price of gasoline falls by 10 to 20 cents a gallon, that's like a mini tax cut for us. So when you ask, what kind of impact it'll have, I think it'll impact the U.S. consumer a little bit for the first 3 to 6 months, and then afterwards they'll adjust to it.
All right,
it's just
Brian. I apologize, we're out of time. Let's hope you're right. We'll continue to monitor the situation very closely. Again, Brian Gilmartin on the U.S. consumer and retail sales. Thank you.